Hey guys, so usually I do these meta and rogue tier lists based on data from ygeoscope.com using dueling book data, but the website is still down, unfortunately, at least until end of this month, maybe longer. So in the meantime, I'm just going to do these tier lists the kind of the traditional way, and hopefully the website comes back online for next month and we can get back to how we normally do it. But in the worst case that it does not come back for a while, I do have some contingency plans in terms of how to make it work with the data. But for now, let's just do it the normal way. And starting this rogue tier list, I think I'm going to first start off by saying, you know what, there are certain decks where I feel like maybe some would consider as rogue, but I think it's tier 2, so I'm not gonna really put it in this video in terms of discussion, and that's something like, you know, Plunder and Drytron and Rika and also Sword, so I guess maybe some might consider that almost as rogue at this point because it's been going down a lot in play. But I think these three decks, they've been getting they've gotten consistent YCS tops. I think they're quite strong. I'm not gonna quite put it at the rogue level yet. Maybe Drytron, you could argue, but for now, feel free to disagree, but that's how I'm gonna put it. And so starting off the rogue tier, let's start with Ignister. I'm going to put it at C for now. Maybe I'll move it around once we advance along on this tier list. But, it's obviously Ignister Mathmech is another variant that would certainly be good. You know, Mathmech is a very good deck. That's another deck that's also, of course, at least tier 2 at this point. So I didn't put it in this tier list. But you know what? Online, it usually does pretty well. Like, its win percentage for this deck has always been quite high. Perhaps part of that is due to, you know, Vizio being always like in top 10 with this deck essentially in any format, including tier 0. So, you know, it's obviously got a lot of potential. Or rather, Ignister is kind of beefy, and it's hard to out for usually many decks. Right now, I guess, you know, for example, let's say Sprite, they can always easily out any tower monsters if they play Pixies, for example, but most Sprite lists aren't playing Pixies anymore, so maybe it's still pretty solid. I decided to put Invoked in here. You know, it used to be kind of a favorite among a lot of decks. Like, it's a very easy deck to play, so if you're new to this game and you're looking into like rogue options, this is certainly a way to start. Although I'm definitely going to tell you in advance, it's not going to be that great anymore. It used to be a tier 1 deck, certainly far from it now, although with the branded stuff, although of course, you know, the play of branded has gone down a lot, but you know, branded fusion, that package does go well with Alistair, and the Invoke package, which I've personally played like even until last summer, and you know, Magical Meltdown is really good for any kind of fusion strategies because it has that branded loss kind of protection. Plunder Patrol, you know, I'm actually going to put this in the A tier of Rogue. I think it's been getting YCS tops, actually. It's with the runic stuff especially. I mean, I think runic cards just make most decks a lot better if they can play it, and if you know how to kind of play that strategy well. I think it's really cool. They did get new support. They got that Earth Synchro ship, and it's kind of interesting with that ship because it gives your opponent a token. So you can actually protect yourself from evenly matched, which is very key in this format when everyone's playing evenly matched, and certainly a lot of players are playing evenly matched even in the main deck, as you would see in my YCS top cut breakdowns of the most played hand traps and staples, which you can certainly check out. But it has a really cool gimmick. It has a variety of different kind of interactions, you know, like a monster negate or a spell trap negate, or let's say like a monster banish, and it's really cool. Marinsis is another one that I almost maybe would consider tier 2, but this is another one I think we can really put up here as A, along with Plunder Patrol, just these water guys or gals. You know, it's gotten a variety of YCS tops, Shannon Long actually being responsible for most of them, I believe, and so certainly it has really cool interactions, you know, with like Zealantis, for example. It's also able to play a lot of hand traps, which is great in this format. You know, being able to play a lot of non-engine cards is certainly essential, and you know, being able to play a lot of hand traps, it's kind of like Mathmech too, really key in this format, and it's got a very good, you know, combo kind of style, but very grindy as well. Generator, this is interesting. Maybe I'll put it at the beginning of D for now. It also got some recent support. It's got a really cool gimmick as well in terms of, you know, once your opponent like draws and then you just like summon all these tokens, and these generator guys, it's got some pretty cool interactions too, like negates and like what have you. Unfortunately, back in the days when this was actually pretty solid was when VFD was still around, and any rank 9 that kind of play is like really strong. But now it's not amazing because, as I alluded to earlier, with everyone playing evenly matched, I think it's very hard when you're a deck that plays tokens and now you have to banish everything but the tokens under evenly. But nonetheless, it's still pretty cool. I think it's a solid rogue strategy. I put Cyber Dragons in here only because that's a deck that I love. honestly, I'm gonna have to put it as worst among the decks that I've listed here, unfortunately. I think if you play with like branded stuff, it's probably better, but at that point, you know, it's really branded Cyber Dragon is like 98% branded cards and just like a little bit of Cyber Dragon cards. It's really hard this format, you know. Yes, the Bestials are not as prevalent, the Shizu Shufflers are almost non-existent now, but you know, it's just not where it used to be. Without Anaconda, it's really hard. With Kashtira, if everything has to get banished, you cannot contact fuse anymore, which means the new, you know, Clockwork Knight just doesn't become as efficient anymore. Hopefully, you know, we get some direct support. There is going to be duality coming. I don't know when, but that's like indirect support at least, so it's kind of there. Eldritch, this is kind of interesting. Maybe I'll put it at C for now, only because it did get a top at YCS Peru. You know, it's Traptrix though, especially since then, has gone down in play a lot, so I might even rank it lower, but I do think it's better than at least these decks for now. I think with Traptrix, you know, yes, you can easily get blown out, but if they don't hard draw the back row outs, which purely based on chance, that you can still win some games and steal some games with Floodgates. Like Skill Drain is pretty strong, and Eldritch, you know, it's not terrible. So we have Runic for hire. Let's put this at B for now. It did actually get top as well. I think it's insane with Runic, as I mentioned earlier, just with Runic, anything is good. But Runic for hire draws a crap ton of cards, and also especially in combined with Sprite, it's very strong. So I think it's really solid. It's pretty slept on right now, I think, and just super good, as you would have seen in those YCS live streams. Punk, let's put this at B as well. I think it's kind of gone down since like at least like a month ago, for example, or especially at the beginning of the format. You know, it's still solid. Synchro heavy strategy. You are burning yourself quite a bit, but you know what? It's pretty interesting. You can also mix Punk with a variety of different stuff as well. Not nearly to the same degree as it once was when, you know, Chaos Ruler was legal. But you know what? This deck is pretty nice. It can draw a lot too. And so Italy at 3, I mean, you know what? You're in pretty good hands. Salad, let's put this also at C, again in that same YCS. Peru, it did get the top, also with like adventure tokens package though. I mean, since then we haven't really seen much of Salad, I don't think. I'm not sure if there's any regional tops with this deck since that YCS top. Someone tell me in the comments if that's happened. I'm sure it's happened somewhere. There's so many regionals happening all the time. But you know what, Salad, I think it also got some recent support announced, if I'm not mistaken. I did see some images floating around on Facebook and whatnot. So you know what, I think it's cool. I think it's certainly far from its tier 1 days, but it still has that potential to be good again, I think. And you know, cyber strategies, obviously Konami seems to love that, along with the dragon type. So I think it's there's the potential is there. It's very grindy, and again, for rogue decks, you know, a lot of new players are usually into more rogue decks, right? You know, they don't want to spend a bunch of money on, you know, tier 1 strategy right out of the gate, and Salad is certainly one of the best entry decks, I think, to learn this game. Dark World, this is an interesting one. I normally would have put this higher, but maybe I'll still put it at B. I think it's still in a better shape than the decks I've listed so far in C and D. But I think the problem with Dark World now is that a lot of players are starting to play Droll. As again, you would have seen the YCS Taka breakdowns, primarily because of Runic decks, such as, you know, for hire, Runic Sprite is a thing, Runic, you know, Plunder Patrol, Runic Naturia for the main reason is why Droll's played, and a lot of times in the main deck. And Dark World just completely folds under Droll, and the problem with Dark World is, you know, you can't really play like, let's say, like Triple Cross Out Call By, like, because for the most part, you're like, you know, you're discarding a lot of your hands, especially through dangers, and so decks like that play dangers, like, usually can't play cards like that, because it's just gonna get wasted, and there's just little value when that gets discarded. So I think it's starting to become be put in a really rough shape now. But otherwise, if your opponent does not have hand traps, like they're gonna do pretty well, right? They're just comboing off for 15-20 minutes. You're gonna lose your hand or you get burned, whatever. Like you're gonna start your turn with like, let's say like two cards maybe, and they have a negate and then they trigger more effects. Like it's gonna be pretty hard. But again, it just completely folds under Droll. So if you're still fine with that and willing to live under that, then maybe it's a deck for you. Tri-Brigade, you know, let's also put this in B because it did have some YCS tops actually. Still, you know, I think it's like Tri-Brigade Sprite perhaps for the most part. You know, really solid deck. I'm glad to see that it's still relevant competitively. I think initially when the format was about to begin, with Cashier being, you know, presumably the number one deck, which it is still. You know, I think a lot of people just assumed Tri-Brigade would kind of die because of the entire banishing things. But again, you know, anytime, like, decks are going to find a way to adapt or like combat through that. And of course, not everyone's going to be on Cashier. And as we've seen, yes, you know, majority of the top cut is Cashier, but in terms of the overall competitive play, when, you know, people enter an event, you know, there's still a lot of variety. So I think Tri-Brigade is still in a pretty solid spot. Scareclaw, I'm also going to put this in B because A, it's gotten some YCS tops, and I think it's pretty interesting. The link for it, or whatever it is, it's really unique, I think, and just being unaffected, and the whole defense position thing I think is kind of cool too. And Scareclaw Cashier, which we're the most familiar with because Cashier plays it, you know, it's solid, like being able to attack while in defense mode and negating the effects of whatever it battled. Like, it's actually pretty solid, and so it's got a pretty decent grind game. I feel like with evenly match being played a lot, it does kind of lose a lot of its resources though, although at least as long as they keep their link 4, they might just be able to live anyways. And again, something like, let's say like Branded, you know, that's kind of hard when you don't play any links, so everything's going in defense mode. So I think Scareclaw is really cool. I think it's going to get even better from what I was told in the future. So you know what, I think that's cool to see. Exosister, man, this is weird. I almost want to put it at D. Let's put it at C for now, end of C. I just don't think I know there's a lot of Exosister lovers out there. I think it's a cool deck, but now with tier limits not being the best deck, there's really no reason for Exosister to be, like, you know, in terms of that was his main goal and why it's all play. And even one YCS, at least one YCS like Niagara, for example, because it had a good countermeasure against tier, but then Cashier became the better option to be a countermeasure against tier, and then the ban list happened, and then tier limits just kind of disappeared entirely. And so now with the best deck also banishing, there's no real benefit that Exorcister provides. They can play, like, I guess, Goes and Match and some back row and stuff, but for the most part I think its meta relevancy has gone down significantly, but still a cool gimmick and cool deck to play. Dinos, we're going to still put this in D tier, unfortunately. For now, you know what? You're going to get some new support. Maybe it'll get better. But right now, I think it's safe to say that the deck is kind of struggling. Has not had any YCS tops. Maybe it's getting regional tops. I'm not sure, actually, about that one. Someone let me know in the comments if it did. I think that'd be cool. Other decks along the same line are, I would say, like Altergeist and La Dolce. Altergeist, I think, also is getting new support. I don't think we know what the new support actually does at this point. But you know what? Trap deck, again, kind of like Eldritch, but Eldritch is better than Altergeist, and then Labyrinth is, or even Traptrix, which I'll get to soon. They're also better than either of these decks. So if you're going to play a back row deck and you like those, you might as well go for those two options instead of Eldritch and Altergeist. But you know what? It's a classic. Altergeist has been around for quite some time, and you know what? Still sticking around. Imperm, Multi-Faker. One of the best 2-card combos out there. Madolce had more meta relevancy last format because of, again, against tiers, you know, this had some grave shuffling capabilities, especially in combination with the Vernosolf cards. Right now, I'm not sure how strong it really is, and in terms of, it's kind of like along the lines of Exorcister, you know, if your main counter and your reason for meta relevancy was because of tier limits, and now tier limits are gone, it's certainly not really there anymore. Sky Striker, I think there was technically a Sky Striker at the top, but I think it was more like Sky Striker Cashier, I think. I could be wrong, but that was at least the one list I saw. Let's still put this at C for now. I think it's solid. Like, going second nowadays is a lot harder than what it used to be, even just like 2-3 years ago, I would say. And I would know because I used to play Cyber Dragons, which was a blind second strategy, and going second has just become more and more you know, hard, right? Even though there are newer cards like Triple Tactics, like Tasking, it's still pretty challenging. But Sky Striker, the benefit is that it has a lot of it has a really good grind game, and can just, it doesn't fold the D barrier, although that card's not really being played as much anymore anyways. But you know what, it's a fan favorite card, I think, or deck rather, and Konami constantly is providing support for it, so I think it's going to be solid. Tier limits, you could also argue this maybe is more of a tier 2 deck. I'm not too sure. I guess in between, so let's just put it at the top of A tier of Rogue. I think you saw it, top YCS. It's really still really good. You just have to be a good pilot, of course, and you know, it was a big brain deck, like let's say with the Shizu tiers last format, but now, you know, you still have to have, you know, big brain like capabilities, but not at that tier 1 status anymore. But if you are still a good pilot with this deck, you're going to do pretty well, and I think it's shown that it has a very strong game even now, despite all those hits to their names. It has changed its deck list quite a bit, and you know what, King of the Swamp is pretty good, so still stick with that. Traptrix, this is an interesting one. It's certainly gone down. Maybe I'll put it like bottom B now. It at least got one YCS top in Peru, and I believe in at least one of the 250 with YCS, it had a YCS top. Definitely gone down a lot. It's kind of weird to categorize this one. You know, is it a back row deck? Is it a combo deck? It's kind of got aspects of both. I think, you know, you kind of see that a lot with trap decks in terms of, you know, like it's very straightforward to side against. So you eventually sort of see them come down again in meta relevancy, or at least in its like power level, because you do get checked quite a bit as the longer you're in the format. But you know what? This was certainly the best value for money deck, especially if you're entering this game. I think this is the one to go for. Certainly really cheap with the structured decks, and you get most of the cards that you need from that. Evola, I don't think this is being talked about enough yet. Maybe I'll put it here because it just, you know, hasn't had any YCS tops, I don't believe, like Elich and Salad even. But I think it still deserves some kind of mention. You are seeing a decent amount on online, I think. I remember when this first came out, like, actually, I think exactly 4 years ago. It was around that time frame. It was interesting. I think now with the new support, it's a bit more consistent. They have some, they have like a counter trap too, which is really nice, and they have like variety of links. The whole equip mechanic is, you know what, old school but kind of cool, and it's an anti-meta strategy, and being able to like target those like special summon monsters and pop them and things like that. So you know what, it's there. I think it's not like a very difficult deck to out, but at the same time, you know, a lot of people probably won't know what most of these cards do, and so I think it's still deserving in any kind of rogue conversation, and I'm assuming it's pretty cheap to play, but I could be completely wrong because I don't actually know how much the new support costs. We also have Heroes. I'm also going to put this here and see. I think it's solid. It's getting some regional success, I believe. No YCS tops lately, unfortunately. But you know what? Joseph was doing really well MBT at the 250th YCS with it. It's always solid. It's always getting new support. And when it comes to rogue decks, you know, if it's a combo deck, I think it has like the best chance at doing well, you know, meta-wise in most formats, right? Because usually when they get to go first, they have some kind of gimmick where it's like good enough, even against meta strategies. But when you have rogue decks that are very, like, let's say for example like back row heavy, or let's say something like Cyber Dragon, which is more like a blind, like an aggro deck. When it comes to rogue decks, those ones, it's a lot harder to do well consistently, at least. I think the combo decks always have the best chance out of any rogue decks. That's just my view. But Hero is really nice, especially, let's say, you know, Dark Angel being able to negate spells, really strong. Dark Claw, Banishing, usually very strong. Obviously, Kashtir is the best deck right now that banishes, so it's not as relevant now, but against Tears last format, that's where it comes up. So it has a lot of gimmicks that you can make good use with. And then lastly, we have Dragon Link, which I did definitely punt it in that meta tier list I did. I certainly should have ranked it higher. I guess, you know what, let's put it at B. I think it's gotten at least one YCS top now. You could even argue at A as well. I guess maybe, you know what, let's do that. I think I'm confident in this deck because Konami loves dragons. Bestial with dragons, it's got a lot of good synergy. And, you know, it has a lot of variety of interactions. It can play through multiple hand traps for the most part. While it's not nearly as meta relevant as it was just, you know, a few months ago or even a year ago, it's always going to come back as well. And if you're playing this deck and if you're a good pilot, because it does require kind of a big brain to do well, you're going to do solid with this deck as a rogue option. So that's it for the rogue tier list. Hopefully you found that useful and enjoyable, and hopefully it helps you, you know, pick a new rogue deck to pick if you're looking for one. So again, hopefully we can just go back to the database tier list next month when the website hopefully comes back online, but if it doesn't, I'll find different workarounds to it. So again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all my Patreons for supporting, as well as my sponsors, and well, take care guys.